Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 63. I apologize in advance. I did not manage to get around to doing that water thing I talked about in the last 2 episodes. I just started a new series on Stationeers, and that ended up being too much of a distraction. To make up for my tardiness, I will spend a good portion of this video sorting out the pipes for the buildings we already placed. This will involve both water and sewage. Other than that, we will start building the new chemical industry, discover that we managed to completely deforest the area around the Electrograd factory, and try to deal with the ridiculous amount of traffic we will inflict on ourselves by doing those water pipes all at once. This should be interesting. Other than that, we will keep an eye on the new city, and even relocate a couple families from the other cities to it, so we have a bit of a bigger workforce available to us. Let's start by lowering the amount of workers in the TV station. It eats up a big portion of the available citizens for minimal benefit. In fact, I should have made it completely empty, at least until the city is full enough to justify using it. Maybe I will do that in the next video. Also, an eagle-eyed viewer noticed that one of the apartment blocks is without power. That could have been pretty bad if left unattended. To fix it, I'll just move the substation a bit closer to the center, so it can cover everything we've built so far. But before I get around to that, it seems the 2 original track layers are holding up traffic going towards Ramosov. Nothing a couple extra signals cannot fix. Let's give the new rail CO a tiny bit of a boost by resettling a couple families to the apartment blocks that are in range for it. I open a dozen or so windows for the already full buildings in the 2 older cities, and move a single click worth of workers from each. Obviously, people aren't too thrilled about this, hence the unhappiness notification. In the end, it will make minimal difference, but it was worth a try. Anyways, it is time to release our construction apparatus upon the new chemical factories. I am still not convinced that we will be able to build all those conveyors at the end, but the only way to tell will be to actually reach them, and see for ourselves. That was fast. The substation and cables are done. Everything has power. The only way to reach these conveyors will be with road vehicles. Let's hope those footpaths will be enough to build the towers, and the connected belts. I've been meaning to do the next thing for quite a while at this point. I want to add a couple high voltage switches, and the only realistic place I can do this is on the export line. So, let's remove a couple pylons, and replace them with switches, with alternating orientations. Some of them will be too far away from the closest construction office, so we will need to move them to flatter terrain. Alright. We can afford to stop exporting power to the Western powers until these are all done. They should come in handy in the future. Population growth is a bit slow. Oh well, we will get there, even if we do it slowly. So, to make up for the lack of progress on the waterfront, let's spend a bit of time on it. I know I said that I will hammer everything into shape for today's episode, but as I've said, I just started a new series on Stationeers, and that ended up consuming all my attention during the week. Before you get too excited about the new series, you should know that I use my own voice in it, and even though I bought a relatively decent beginner-grade microphone, the audio quality is still not quite there yet. There are some clipping issues I simply cannot get rid of, since I am not an audio guy. And I still tend to mumble, not to mention the long pauses in my delivery. So, consider yourselves warned. The game is amazing, and I think I made good progress in the first couple episodes, but I won't hold it against you if the commentary turns you off. To compensate, I decided to add a bit of jazz and blues music under it, since the game has no music of its own. So even if the commentary is a bit cringe, maybe the music makes it bearable. Anyways, as I've said, most of our time today will be spent on placing the pipes for the water and sewage networks. The water is the easier part, since if there is no pressure, we can just add pipes to it, and that will take care of those pesky hills, but the sewage works differently. I will try my best to explain when we get to that part. As usual, I try to lay out my pipes in neat parallel lines, so they at least give the impression of an organized setup, even though it really isn't. We have 3 outlets on the treatment facilities, but only 2 inlets on the storage reservoirs. If we leave one of the outlets unconnected, then we will not take full advantage of the facility's maximum production capacity. So, if we add a big pump, we can pipe those outlets into them, and just use 2 of the pump outlets to connect to the storages. I am not sure if the pumps will be able to grab all the water from the 2 filtration buildings, so if we end up with some water getting stuck, we can just add a 3rd tank, and pipe the extra water in that. I love the illusion of organization we get by simply allowing the different pipes to snap together. Okay, let's connect the water tanks to the substations in the city. I will build the water pipe splitters in between the storages and the substation, in terms of elevation. Hopefully, we can just use gravity to bring the fresh clean water down from the hill. Got to love this song. I tend to blabber on so much that we often neglect to appreciate the superb music of this game. Okay, time to do the same in Valentinsk. This is a trickier terrain to work on. The different facilities are much closer together, making piping a bit claustrophobic. I still try to make it look organized, with varying amount of success. As you can see, the real challenge will be the outlets of the treatment facilities. We still need to add pumps. There. The same as with Michalovia, we have 2 outlets left open on the pumps, and if they cannot handle the throughput needed to empty out the treatment facilities, we can just add a 3rd tank. I also leave 1 outlet open on the storages. I think they will be useful setting up the lines going to the nearby industries, as well as the loading stations, so we can move the excess water to more remote areas, like Farograd. Since I am still a beginner at the water system, I am not quite sure how the game handles water pressure. Basically, does it work like a suction pump? You know, like when you try to siphon gas from a car. As long as the input is higher up than the output, it works, regardless if there is a momentary elevation increase in the entire pipe network. Or, do we need to add pipes for every little bump along the way, even though the combined elevation change would be negative? These are the kinds of questions that come to mind, but I always forget about them, and never end up creating a test environment. I have a good handle on how the sewage network goes, that doesn't even allow placing pipes if they go uphill. I guess it's not really feasible to add liquid pumping station to a network that potentially contains solid waste, and I'm not talking about poop, but all sorts of things people tend to flush down the toilet. We need to treat sewage pumps as some sort of elevator. If your destination is above your point of origin, then you only need to make sure to add a quote-unquote pump in a place where its output end up higher than the destination, and its input lower than the point of origin. For example, in the case of Michalovia, I will place the collector switches on the same level as the substations, and that will allow us to connect them up, since they are on the same level, which is allowed. But the treatment plant is higher up than the city, so by adding a pump close to the facility's inlets, the pump's own inlet will end up lower than the switches in the city, so technically, the pipe will go downhill. Then the pump elevates the sewage to the level of the treatment plant, and we can connect things up without issues. The biggest issue we face while placing these pipes is that they cannot decide which building they are allowed to go under. Some will block them, other will not. So, the inlets of these pumps are lower underground than the outlets of the collector switches, so the pipes will go downhill. To maximize efficiency, I could have made sure to use the pumps that only go as deep as we absolutely needed to, but I have more than enough resources to afford the deepest pump. Alright, we are one step closer to completion. What we need to deal with next is how we will deliver workers and chemicals. Going by the staff numbers, I think I will go with 10 microbuses for each city. As for the chemical deliveries, I've been planning on using the local distribution offices. We just need to start ordering chemicals for the town warehouses, and then we just need to add the necessary assignments to the various DOs around the Republic. And this is where I noticed that we completely ran out of wood in Electrograd. I will reforest this small patch now, but when we turn off the water system, I will need to deal with this a bit more deeply. This made me worried, since I didn't know how long we've been without chemical production. It seems it's been for a few months at the very least. Not good. Both clothing and the electronics production heavily relies on chemicals, so this will have a big impact on those industries. All this could have been avoided if the woodcutters could replant trees they cut down. Such an essential feature, still missing. I wasn't ready to dive into the water system for Mutagrad just yet. I will deal with it in the future. We should finish building these pipes and pumps we placed today, before we go any further. Since Lukovo only has access to road vehicles, we will need to rely on Adomski for some of the construction around Valentinsk as well. Not all buildings have a connection to the road network. I should also make sure that everything can be reached, even if only by helicopters. Before I order the microbuses, I should send these new snowplows over to Babinski. So, as I've said, I will build 10 for each city, and see how far that takes us. It should be more than necessary, the distances involved are rather short. Also, instead of using the default paint job, I decided to use blue, since they are involved in water production. We can also add the chemical deliveries to the rail distribution yard. It's just a simple job of enabling it for the 2 town warehouses. As soon as we start making chemicals again, we should start seeing some arrive in the towns. As for the wood shortage, I decided to get rid of those 2 medium-sized fields, and replace them with 2 big ones, even though they are cut down a little bit, thanks to power poles. They should still yield more crops overall, than those 2 smaller ones. To make them a bit more uniform, I'll just add a short piece of dirt footpath to the wonky parts. They will blend in with the packed dirt, so it won't be too noticeable. Let's just add them to the local distribution offices, and we can get rid of the 2 old ones, and use the new free real estate for the forest. I accidentally used poplar trees here. No big deal, I've seen enough tree farms using them to not be bothered about the discrepancy. The new chemical factory complex is coming along, the foundations seem to be done. And the last snowplow is finished. They've been in the queue for years at this point, so I'm really glad to finally see them in the wild. The city seemed to be humming along relatively smoothly. There even seemed to be enough consumer goods being dropped off at the local warehouse to keep the stores stocked. It will take a while for these trees to mature, before they can be cut down. I really should have enabled temporary imports in the rail yard until it gets sorted. Mostly because it will come back to bite us in a little bit. The cross-country railroad is also progressing nicely. It will soon connect up to the Mutigrad Junction, and then we can move on to the part where we go over the river. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the tracks around the city are pretty much ready to be electrified. I could have just started doing that, but for some reason I decided to start building the chemical branch. I don't really know why, I'm sure I had my reasons at the time. Also, just to be sure, I mass-enabled construction on everything in the chemical plants. I'm sure it will be finished way before we could even begin to think about having people coming in from Mutigrad. We are still very much in the phase where everyone is able to find work in town. And I just watched the track layer drive by the junction. I forgot that we haven't built the other side yet. Since we have 2 lanes going into the rail CO, one of the track layers will inevitably choose to go around the city, since the other lane is reserved by its sibling. Once the signals are all in their final configuration, this will be the only way for them to go, since I built this place as a one-way circuit. So, at least for now one of them can take the shorter route. I think this is where I noticed that we have a pretty noticeable dip in overall happiness in the Republic. We have 2 contributing factors for that. One, is that there isn't really any entertainment present in Mutigrad. Sure, there is culture, sport, and other general services, but no entertainment. We have the Ferris wheel in Valentinsk, and the Autodrome in Mikhailovia, but nothing in Mutigrad. And the other cause of the lack of happiness is this. Look at that traffic. This place was already pretty busy before, but now we have a buttload of construction machinery moving around, increasing the traffic exponentially. Sending the local delivery trucks home will temporarily clear it up, but this will need a bit more drastic intervention. I think, giving outgoing traffic priority over incoming traffic will help keep this intersection a bit more clear. Just to make it super clear for the drivers, I will even add a stop sign, instead of a generic give-way sign. They still seem to enter the intersection, even though they have no clean way out of it yet. But at least we managed to make things move again. The next offending intersection is the one after the bridge. We can just tell it to give priority to the busier exits, and it will be fine. We will come back later, and will be forced to add the first permanent traffic light of the Republic. As for Valentinsk, everything seemed to be hovering around the usual 80%, so this place is fine right now. Our interventions seem to have been enough for the time being. But it will start experiencing problems again later. For Mutagrad, we could give the citizens a couple extra avenues of entertainment. I think that little plaza area we built in the last episode is perfect for it. It's fairly central, so it will be in range for almost everyone. We can replant the trees and bushes once they are built. Also, I almost forgot to add the indoor pools for the city. The only place for sport is the stadium right now, and I don't know if the mod creator makes it close down during winter, so we should build a couple, just to be safe. And we have more traffic forming. All these concrete mixers and buses full of construction workers are really slowing things down. I first tried to solve it with just signs, but I will soon realize that this requires a traffic light. My first attempt will be the default 2-step light, with 20 seconds intervals. It will help, but it will still prevent one side from entering the intersection, even though they have a green light. The final setup will give all 3 roads an equal 20 seconds window to do what they want. There we go. Things are clearing up. I think adding an extra restriction on overtaking slower cars when approaching the light should also be beneficial. As long as we don't see any tailbacks happening on any of the roads, we can call this fixed. We do have a bit of a problem here, thanks to all these buses deciding to go for a drink all at once. After they leave, things should go back to normal. Maybe I will give the road on the right 30 seconds, instead of 20 in the next episode. The other two seem to be coping with the situation rather well. But this is a temporary issue either way. Once all those dumpers and other construction machinery finish working on the water pipes, things will go back to normal. Oh, yeah. I also said that the chemical shortage will come back to bite us. That drop in happiness is because of the lack of electronics. Without chemicals, we cannot make either plastics or electro-components, both of which are vital parts of the electronics industry. So our citizens have been going without them for a while at this point. So, in the next episode, I think we will need to keep an eye on that intersection. I mean, It's only like this because of all the water works, but I would like to avoid a disaster happening if I can. Especially since winter is fast approaching. Speaking of, this will be the first real test of the new city. If we survive without issues, we will know it's ready for prime time. We have road cleaning locally, which will keep the path clean all the way to the heating plant, and it has plenty of coal too. I'm more worried about the low happiness. It's way lower than the usual national average, and I can only hope that building those carousels will help matters. As for the water, I highly doubt I can do what I need to do during the weekend, and still work on the episode itself, so we might need to postpone the big construction until next Friday. But we can still do a bit of in-episode work on it like we did today. And we can also start electrifying the tracks around Mutagrad, which will allow us to put the current long-range delivery trucks into storage, and start using trains, like we do for the other cities. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. If you did, you can support me on Ko-fi, for which you can find a link in the description. If you are not the donating type, that is fine too. You can still support me by leaving a like, or subscribing to the channel, which just might motivate me to make more. Until then, see you later.